Mackey, Judd Zulgad, and Declan Goff producing. And every Friday, we jump into Skol Reddit and see what our friends on the internet are talking about as it pertains to the Vikings. Declan, what are we diving into today?
Yeah, I saw this across the feed. It was, can you believe the Vikings don't have a championship yet? So it begs the question, are the Vikings the best franchise in one of the 4 major sports to never win the big one?
Judd, I actually have categorized a lot of these teams. I've done a lot of legwork on this, but just like before we get into the candidates and the tail of the tape here,
Yep.
You've watched more Vikings football than we have. You're older than we have. Just does it seem that this might be the case anecdotally that the Vikings might be the best franchise to never have won a Super Bowl or a major championship?
Unfortunately, the answer is absolutely yes. Yes. In fact, so if you go back now to the last, 5, 8 years, the St. Louis Blues, run of success, right? No championships. But guess what? Voila, last spring, championship. The Washington Capitals, not around as long as the Vikings, but definitely had some good teams. No championships. Yep. With Ovechkin, oh my God, are they ever going to win one? Voila, they win one. The Eagles, until they came here on our soil here in Minnesota and won a Super Bowl. The Eagles, no Super Bowl titles. Guess what they have now? A Super Bowl title. So we're talking about the rare air of, let's draw the comparisons now. Okay, the Bills went to 4 Super Bowls. The Utah Jazz had that run against Jordan's Bulls when the Jazz were very good, didn't win a championship. They still don't have an LOB. But
the LOB.
The LOB, man. But I'm gonna tell you right now, I don't think it's hyperbole to say that if you are putting together a top 5 list in the 4 major sports of franchises without a championship, given the amount of time that the Vikings have played, given the amount of success, we always go through this team's history. 1961. If you go through their history, you do not have 10 years of horse bleep or 15 years. You have a team that has been basically since Bud Grant took over in 1967, extremely competitive, 4 Super Bowls, a few very tough conference championship game defeats. I think it's very fair to pound your fist and say that the Minnesota Vikings of the 4 major pro sports are the best franchise not to have a championship.
Yeah, it is. So I'll go through some of the candidates here, but compared to some of the other local teams, the Twins every once in a while are going to give you 10 years of horse bleep, right? They gave you a bunch of horse bleep in the 80s until 87. They gave you a horse bleep in the 90s between 93 and 2000. They gave 70s. You a horse bleep.
They had a run in the 70s. They were bad. They went downhill. Yes.
They give you a horse bleep. I would actually say the Timberwolves give you almost exclusively horse bleep, which is great. Outside of the 8 years of Kevin Garnett playoff runs, you're just shoveling horse bleep into your mouth. The North Stars and the Wild have very rarely given you long stretches of horse bleep, but collectively no championships. So like the North Stars, because they moved to Dallas, don't count because technically Dallas would be the franchise that they won a championship in 1999. So you could say Minnesota hockey in general on this list. But if you compare Minnesota hockey to Vikings football, I think the Vikings have been more consistently top-level good since the early 1960s than Minnesota hockey. So
I agree.
The other teams in the NFL that haven't won a Super Bowl yet, the Buffalo Bills, you mentioned, 4 appearances, 4 consecutive, and 4 losses.
Mm-hmm.
The Cincinnati Bengals, 2 appearances, Falcons, a couple appearances, Panthers, Cardinals, Titans, Chargers. And then there's 4 teams that have never even been to a Super Bowl in the Browns, Lions, Jaguars, and Texans. The only team on that list that I would put in this conversation is probably the Bills. But even let's stack the Bills up against the Vikings. Better franchise to never have won a Super Bowl.
Not close.
They've both lost 4 times. I would argue that the Bills have given you so much garbage the last 20 years that they just aren't on the Vikings. Like the Vikings have at least been good to great at times the last 20 years, and they haven't given you long stretches of horse bleep like the Bills have.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think the Bills are above the Vikings in that discussion. Major League Baseball candidates, the only franchises that haven't won a World Series, Mariners, Rangers, Padres, the Rays. There's a couple other ones too, but none that really stand. I mean, the Mariners and the Rangers have been around since the early 70s. And the Padres have been around since like the 70s, and the Rangers didn't. Yeah, the Rangers didn't even make the playoffs for like 30 years, from the 70s until the mid 1990s, and so they can't really count on this list. Other sports, I mean, the Buffalo Sabres haven't won a championship, but they're mostly terrible all the time. So
yeah, they've
they've had
been
a couple stretches.
bad for a long time now.
In the NBA, the Clippers, the Nuggets, and the Pacers are interesting. The Pacers are interesting because they're pretty consistently good, but I don't think in my lifetime I've never looked at the Pacers as being like
the Jazz too, right?
A transcended team. And that's when we get to the Jazz
Yep.
and the Suns in the NBA. Yep. So I would say I think the finalists for this conversation are Vikings, Utah Jazz, Phoenix Suns, and I'm taking the Buffalo Bills out of it because I just don't think they're on the Vikings level. So, yeah, I mean, the Vikings, like the Phoenix Suns had a great run in the 70s and the early 80s, and then another great run in the 90s with Charles Barkley and Kevin Johnson and Dan Mikowski. And then they invented fun ball 3-point shooting. Yes, you're right. I'm thinking of the Packers quarterback.
Yeah, you're thinking of the guy Favre replaced. Magic Man.
But then Mike D'Antoni comes along. They invent fun ball in the 2000s and shoot a bunch of threes. But they've been to 2 finals ever, and I don't think at any point in my lifetime the Suns have been regarded as the best team in the NBA. So you can point to multiple times in Vikings history, in the 70s, in 1998, maybe 2009, where they were regarded as the best team in the NFL and just didn't pay it off with a championship. And so when I stack them up, I think the Vikings stack up against all these as the best franchise.
Is this somehow good? Like, is it? Hey, they're the best to not win a championship.
We're next in line.
How long can you be next in line? That's my question. Like 2009 finally felt like, okay, you know what? They're going to break through. 1998, I think no question, they're going to break through. How long can you feel like, you know what? This bridesmaid act is going to end pretty damn soon here.
Yeah, it is mathematically impossible to be this good for 50 years and to not have a championship.
Am I in the ground or not?
Coming at some point.
Am I in the ground or not?
How long are you going to live?
I'm not telling you that. What I'm saying is I'm 50 now. I'm 50 now. No guarantees I get to 60. But am I going to be in my lifetime? Let's just say, for the sake of this, I got 25 years. Is that pushing it? 25 years left? Are the Vikings going to win a Super Bowl title in the next 25 years?
Yes. 100% yes. The Vikings will win a Super Bowl in the next 10 years.
That's I can't go 100%.
In the next 10 years, they will win a Super Bowl. Yes. Here's another thing.
Who's your coach?
About the Vikings. Not Mike Zimmer. I think Zim's getting up there in age. I don't think it's going to be Mike Zimmer. I mean, I think they'd have to win a Super Bowl in the next 2 years for it to be Mike Zimmer. I don't know if I see that happening.
Okay.
So I don't have like the blueprint for you, but I know they're going to be, as usual, competitive again this season and next season. Like, they're not going to be a train wreck. In fact, I define train wreck as 4 wins or fewer. If you were a 2-14 team or a 4-12 team, that's a train wreck. 5-11 is pretty bad too, but like, train wreck is 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4 wins. And the Vikings going back to 1967, so take their first handful of years of expansion as they're ramping up their franchise out, when they finally got their roster underneath them, and Fran Tarkenton,
Bud Grant
from the late 60s. Yep. The Vikings have only had 3 train wreck seasons in that history. That's nuts. That's crazy.
If I could wave a magic wand right now and give you a 5-year period in which this franchise flailed away, won 3 games, won 4 games, popped back up and won 6 games, but that led you to higher draft picks and potentially, let's say I wave that magic wand post Childress. And so 2010, 11, when they did win 3 games, by the way, but let's say it continues on. And so now you've got higher draft picks from that era. You've got a quarterback potentially. Would you take the exchange of, you know what, the Vikings were really, really bad for what seems to us like an extended period, but now you've got these pieces in place, as Brett used to say, that could take you to a championship?
No, because you're using the word could.
Yeah, well,
and
I
could use the word. I could use the word could right now. Like, I'll take the consistently good teams that still have hope. Like this team still has hope to build on, and this team could win a championship in the next. It wouldn't be entirely shocking if the Vikings won the Super Bowl in the next 2 or 3 years. We could debate about Kirk Cousins and the offensive line and things, but it wouldn't be outlandish if the Vikings won the Super Bowl in the next 2 or 3 years, unless you wholeheartedly disagree.
Yeah, Yeah, I don't think so.
You're also jaded by
I don't think
50
I see
years.
it happening. I think you need a different quarterback, and I also think that you probably need a different philosophy of how your team operates.
Yeah.
If this defense was for 2020 was one of what we consider to be Mike Zimmer's best defenses, I might be able to have the conversation, but I think it's going to be okay, but not great. And I think that the way that you're going about trying to construct a championship team right now is probably incredibly flawed. It doesn't mean that your team's not going to be good. It's just a flawed potential recipe for a championship, which is why I think you probably need to turn the page again, and perhaps the next coach and next regime could have that chance. But to be very clear, I see nothing that leads me to believe that this franchise is at a cliff. Like I see nothing about that. So this conversation very much hits on what's been probably a positive about the Vikings for a long time, and perhaps a negative, which is you sure as hell don't say, you know what, I really see 3 wins and then 4 wins.
Would you guys view it as I'm trying to think of the word I'm going for here. If the Vikings get to another Super Bowl for the first time since the 70s and they lose, what kind of an accomplishment will making it to another Super Bowl but coming up empty be in your minds? Because I actually I think it's championship or bust.
I've told you this before.
At this point,
I think people would be absolutely thrilled because there is an entire group. I mean, a stadium full, a state full of people who don't even know what a Super Bowl feels like. And Phil, I think going back to the old show, we've debated this. I feel like if you get to a Super Bowl and lose, yes, there's disappointment, but there's also a thrill of we finally at least got back.
Dex, what about you?
I haven't seen any of the 4 major men's sports team here get into a championship. So I just want to see them go once. Yeah. So yeah, it's not that you're gonna lose, and I'm sure I'd be heartbroken for sure. But I just want to see them get there, and I would be completely satisfied with that. Completely.
Yeah, see, I think it's easy to say that, but
sure.
I just like I'm not, and I'm kind of the same. Like I barely remember the 1991 Twins run. I was 6 years old, and so in terms of like my recollection of Minnesota teams being in the championship series or whatever, I remember Game 6 and 7 as a little kid in first grade, and I just think the Vikings have accomplished everything there is to accomplish in this league except win a championship. I'll add another element for the Vikings into this conversation about best franchise to never win a Super Bowl, especially against these finalists, the Suns, the Jazz, the Buffalo Bills we'll put back into the conversation. Compare the list of top iconic players on all 4 of those franchises up against each other. Like, who are the best players in Utah Jazz history? Stockton and Malone.
Yep.
Yeah.
And maybe like Andrei Kirilenko for 5 minutes.
Stockton and Malone. Very
right?
safe, yeah. Yes.
And like Jeff Hornacek rubbing his cheek before free throws, right? Like, that's it. The Phoenix Suns, who are the best players in Phoenix Suns history? I mean,
Nash.
Charles Barkley played there for a couple minutes. Steve Nash. I'm sure there was somebody from the
Cedric
70s
Sabalas, let's not forget him.
Paul Westphal, did he play for the Suns? He coached them.
Yeah, but that's before.
Yeah, Cedric Sabalas, like it's a nothing list, right? It's a nothing list. Buffalo Bills, okay, Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed.
That's a pretty good one.
Bruce Smith, like there's some good ones. O.J. Simpson.
That's a pretty iconic
on the football
list.
Side, right?
Yes, sir.
But it's nowhere near the Vikings list. The Vikings Purple People Eaters defense. Randy Moss, Chris Carter, Fran Tarkenton, John Randall, Brett Favre. Even you could put on this list if we're gonna put Charles Barkley on the Suns list. Brett Favre belongs on the Vikings list. Mm-hmm. So I just whether it's Hall of Fame caliber players or consistently good seasons or trips to the Super Bowl and division championships, like all of it has been accomplished. And so my bar from this point forward, not that you can't have like unexpected success in a season like the other, 2017, they weren't supposed to go that far. And so that was kind of fun, right?
Right.
But from this point forward, my bar for what satisfies me watching the Vikings is very, very high, like Super Bowl high for the most part.
I think your bar would be absolutely correct if they had gone to the Super Bowl and lost in 98 or 09. And then we'd be like, well, that was fun, but let's take that next step. But to what Declan's saying, and this is the interesting thing, for a town that has every major sport, And God bless the Lynx because they've got us multiple championships. But for a town that has the NBA, NHL, baseball, and the National Football League, and to have a large group of people who are near their 30th birthday,
Yep.
not even forget the championship, forget the parade. I'm talking about the World Series or a Super Bowl. That's why I think that people would be just thrilled by, oh my God, we finally got there.
And the fact that I've seen all 4 of those teams get to the doorstep. All of those 4 teams have gone to the conference finals in the last 15, 16 years. All 4 of them. Some of them multiple times. And they haven't been able to break through. It's painful.
Yeah.
But the Vikings are the one where it's felt like this should be real, and it's still not.
It will be real. I promise you all. I promise the 2 of you. I promise the audience.
Yeah, I'll be taking a dirt nap.
It will be real. You're going to sit up like The Undertaker.
By God, it's Judd Zolgad. He's risen from the dead.
Yeah, Royce and I can come
That's
back.
Judd Zolgad's music. By God.
Sid will still be alive. That's the one good thing. Sid will be fine.
Sid will be 114 years old.
We finally did it.
Walking around inside Target Field, inside US Bank Stadium. All right, well, let us know what you think. You can hit us up in the comment section, youtube.com/scorenorth. Do you think the Vikings will win a Super Bowl, let's say in Judd's lifetime? However long that will
Clock
be.
is ticking, folks.
Let's go 10 years. In the next 10 years.
The clock is... Oh, you son of a... You know what?
Thanks for hanging out with us on Purple Daily. We'll see you next time.